Greetings. Welcome to Dweller Director's Cut. I hope you're ready to revisit this weird, at times dark, existential, and oh so deeply personal story. But you're not taking this journey alone. My name is Ben, and I'm going to be your guide. This podcast is based on a film I made and directed, and also lived through, back in 2024, called Dweller. I know it was just 2 short years ago, but it feels like a lifetime to me. Maybe that's why I'm still surprised when people still, to this day, bring it up to me, say they liked it, and even ask some pretty good and quite valid questions about the concepts explored in the film that its initial 40-minute runtime neglected to answer. I hope you find that this expanded version of the story is a more complete telling, both in terms of historical and occult context, as well as the real, emotional, interpersonal truths that must be at least acknowledged to accurately convey this story and all its implications. When I made the original film, I thought I understood what it was about. But looking back now, I think I knew deep down, but wasn't ready or able to articulate the full story. So in these first 3 installments, we'll revisit the original journey in its fullest form, restoring the conversations, context, and rabbit holes that shaped the film, some of which never made the final cut. Then, in the 4th installment, what I'm going to call the first season of this podcast, we'll step beyond the film entirely. We'll examine what happened after the camera stopped rolling, how time has changed my perspective, and why I now believe the real story was only truly beginning. Now, I'll admit, these implications weren't something we thought about back when we filmed or even put out the initial film, but the emotions were there from the start. So let's go there. Let's begin the story from the start. Well, a little bit about me. I'm Ben. I've been a filmmaker my whole life, and how I fell into paranormal investigating was kind of by accident, initially at least. I attended Michigan State University for documentary film production, and during the freshman orientation, where you walk around and learn about all the hundreds of clubs and extracurriculars the school offered, like bird watching, disc golf, flag football. I'm not sporty. Luckily for me, this girl in a cardboard cutout ghost half-done DIY costume jumped down in front of me. Jump scare. And she said, you need to come to the ghost club this Wednesday. And that was just kind of like, what the fuck? I didn't expect many people to be there. It's a ghost club at Michigan State University. But come Wednesday, I was surprised to see a packed room. It turns out there's a ghost club, which is more formally referred to as the MSU Paranormal Society, was actually one of the largest university-based ghost hunting groups in the Midwest. Who knew? Not me. But apparently the producers and talent scouts over at A&E did, because pretty soon after joining the Paranormal Society, we were in some serious talks and initial rounds of contracts to star in a reboot of the classic ghost hunting show, Paranormal State. I ultimately pulled out, but what a strange alternate reality that would have been. But my 4 years in college getting my undergraduate degree in documentary film production was a time of great creativity. I created and produced the Afterlife Road Haunted Michigan web series, which in just a few short years pumped out over 200 episodes, which I then capped off with a short film called Afterlife, which was all about what it was like investigating the paranormal as a college student. And to celebrate the success of this short film, and to toast the end of an era, we booked one last paranormal investigation as we neared graduation. Obviously, this was a very liminal time in our lives, and the bittersweet emotions were pretty high as we geared up for one last paranormal investigation, not just as college kids, but perhaps forever. Think back to when you were graduating college. You never knew what was going to happen next. People move away, you start your careers, you settle down, you get busy with work, passions sometimes fade, new hobbies form. All that is natural, it's just growing up. Now, we know in hindsight that we wouldn't stop paranormal investigating. Our interest in the field has only grown stronger, and if you thought our creative output during college was impressive, just look at all that we've accomplished since then. But again, put yourself in our shoes in this moment. We had no way of seeing into the future then. For all we knew, this investigation would be the last one as we knew it. This was one last hurrah It was intended to be that way. We went in thinking that way. And it was only fitting that for an investigation this significant, we returned to one of our favorite and most frequented locations, the infamous Stimson Hospital in Eaton Rapids, Michigan. Built in 1874, this 5,000 square foot Victorian home served the local community as a 20-bed hospital for decades. The hospital actually became known for its cleanliness and the amount of people that gave birth there. Yes, it's easy to overhype the more morbid history here. Like any hospital, people did pass away. But what some people fail to acknowledge is that people did travel from all over the world just to give birth here at the Stimson Hospital. It's a pretty remarkable history. It was pretty much a shining light in the community until it closed down and then sat abandoned for many, many years. That's, I think, when it began to build up a haunted reputation, and it was not too long after we started ghost hunting that the current owners purchased the building and began renovating it with the ultimate goal of transforming it into a bed and breakfast. But once that bed and breakfast becomes a reality, I'll be honest, you'd have to be pretty brave to book a room at the Stimson Hospital. It's been our most frequented haunted location for a reason. It's the most active place we've ever been. We caught our first EVP there, of a whispering voice saying, "Help me." Alright, lights off. We've also caught numerous objects moving on their own, defying physics.
That car just moved.
We've seen shadow figures, caught unexplained lights illuminating in empty halls.
A flash of white sort of right here.
And caught footsteps walking down an empty staircase. It's a place that has treated us well, and that we know well. That's in part what makes the events that unfolded at this last hurrah so perplexing. We're intimately familiar with the building and its energies, and what transpired was not normal for Stimson Hospital. It was not anything we had ever experienced there, or anywhere for that matter, before. I'm now going to introduce all the listeners to Brianna.
Hi, I'm Brianna.
Brianna was the first person I met at the MSU Paranormal Society and has been a longtime collaborator and creative partner here at Crossroads of Curiosities. She was obviously present at this final investigation and was sort of an objective third party to the events. She didn't directly experience what the rest of us did, but she saw our reaction and can testify to the aftermath. I bring this up because I have a recording of us discussing the events afterwards, and I'm going to splice in some of her original commentary. So when you hear a girl talking, that's Brianna. But okay, here it goes. I've stalled enough. I still get chills even thinking about this. Okay, on the second floor of the Stimson Hospital, the first room at the top of an old staircase is the former patient room. For us, this is where a majority of our paranormal experiences have happened, and this night was no exception. We had found a newspaper clipping from the 1920s talking about a nursing shortage at the Stimson Hospital, and this investigation on this night was 100 years later, and we were seeing very similar headlines as we were coming out of COVID, out of the pandemic. So we really leaned into that potential commonality and similarity during the first part of the evening, and it seemed to pay off. We all saw a shadow of an arm literally reaching out towards us in the reflection of a mirror. A string of interesting experiences followed, culminating in us hearing a disembodied male voice coming from outside in the hallway. So Brianna had the bright idea of splitting up to cover more ground.
We decided to split up, and I stayed in that room.
The old patient room.
And you guys went out into the hallway, and after that, I started feeling like cold, like fingers on my leg. And I'm like, well, that's weird.
We had no idea you were feeling this, but at the same time, in the hallway, the entire vibe shifted.
You guys were like, oh my god, there's something out here. I've never seen you guys more panicked.
Yeah, we came running back into the patient room to tell you how creepy it was getting out there.
You're like, we need the light on. You need to go close that door. I'm like, seriously?
Yeah, because it was too creepy out there to go back in the doorway. It was dark.
What is going on with you guys? So I got up, and there was definitely a vibe out in that hallway, and I'm like, okay, well, maybe they aren't making this up, but turned on the light, closed the door, and I'm like, okay, what's going on?
Well, here's what was going on. As soon as we returned to the patient room, we discussed with Brianna the feeling out in the hallway, and then she told us about a strange sensation she felt at the same time of cold fingers touching her. After talking for a minute or two, I caught myself looking with sheer and utter dread at the doorway. It's hard to explain this, but you could barely make out the threshold of the door and its frame. The hallway itself was just darker than dark can be. Darker than it was even moments ago. I was so distracted I needed to close the door and turn on the lights. And I tried taking 2 steps towards that direction. To do so, the light switch is right by the door. But something happened that stopped me right in my tracks, and I retreated.
I really don't like. Oh. No.
I just in my mind's eye or whatever, it just got the flash image of someone standing right in front of me.
Ooh.
It's just dark over there. I didn't like the idea of someone being there. I had never seen anything in my mind's eye before. I didn't even know until that moment what it was like to experience a, dare I say, vision. And as the feeling intensified, so did this mind's eye image. It was this tall, looming and lanky shadow. But shadow is underselling it a bit. It was more like a silhouette. Like I said about the hallway itself, just darker than dark should be. And it slowly came up that staircase, turned to face the room, saw us looking back at it in fear, and took a step forward. Not into the room, but lingering in the threshold of the doorway. I couldn't make out any details, just its silhouette, but I could tell it was smiling with a big, big grin. Not one that I could see, but that's just the vibe I got. And the feeling, oh boy, the feeling. This all lasted probably 15 seconds, but it felt like an eternity. Remember how I said we've been to Stimson Hospital several times? We knew this place. And what we felt here in this moment was not something from the hospital. That was the initial and most paralyzing fear. It legitimately felt like someone broke into the building. Remember, this all kicked off after we heard a disembodied voice, so it was a very real thought in my mind that there was an intruder. You know those horror movies where a bad guy breaks into a family's home and all the music stops as the family hides and cowers in the corner of a dark room, just praying the intruder doesn't find them? But then, as the camera slowly pushes in on their terrified faces, as they try not to make even the slightest peep, you hear off camera just the faintest creak of footsteps coming up the stairs.
The intruder is coming. He will find you. Don't make a sound.
That's how it felt. A very primal fear and real danger. And all of us that were in the hallway area when we split up felt this. As if once we crossed that threshold back into the patient room, we triggered something to make itself known to us in that moment. It's crazy because multiple people in that moment all felt the same thing without communicating to each other, and somehow all saw the same mind's eye image. I mean, could this be like a shared hallucination? Implausible, but I guess so. But that doesn't explain why this place, where we've been so many times over the years and have gone on record saying how incredible the entire hospital is and how comfortable we all are there, gave such a terrible vibe randomly one time that we all agreed we felt. It didn't make any sense. It didn't make sense. Even Brianna, who was kind of a third-party witness, if you want to call it that, felt a vibe in the hallway. She was watching from afar, us reacting to the vibe and the mind's eye image, which she did not experience. But once we convinced her to close the door and turn on the lights because we were too scared, she felt that same vibe as she approached and locked eyes with the threshold.
I've come to realize, more lately, that I need to trust my vibes more and that they're not always adrenaline. Yes, they definitely can be explained by adrenaline 98% of the time, but you can't also ignore that adrenaline. That is happening for a reason. Was it because you guys were scared and panicked coming into that room that was making me feel something? Or was there actually something out in the hallway? I don't know. But I feel like it's a disservice to not mention it.
This was a pivotal experience in our paranormal investigation journey. Even those that didn't directly experience what I did still acknowledged something was off. Something was different. It really, really was. And we all had to contend with the fact that maybe vibes aren't always just adrenaline or something woo-woo. And for those of us that experienced this, dare I say, entity, because that's how it felt in the moment, this silhouette thing that entered the hallway, walked up the stairs, and lingered in the doorway, grinning at us, it really stuck. Stuck with me for a long time. And with this being our last big investigation for a while, there was nothing else for us to do but discuss and try and theorize what the hell just happened. The first struggle I had was, how do I even attempt to Google this? You just heard how long it took me to describe the experience. How on earth do I distill this down to one searchable question and try and figure out what this thing was, or if anyone else had experienced it before? I initially focused on the fact that it was smiling. I looked up if anyone had experienced a tall, smiling entity before, and that's when I learned about Indrid Cold, also known as the Smiling Man. It also struck me as odd, because when we returned to the patient room to do a spirit box session asking what we experienced, we got the response Indrid, which I included in the original Dweller film. We had gone back after experiencing this weird thing, we did a session, we got the name Indrid. Put it in the film. Seemed random at the time, but we got that name coming through. I also had the fact now that he's known as the Smiling Man, and I found it a little interesting that he was associated with the Mothman, which is known as a harbinger of doom. And was it too much of a stretch to point out that Brianna felt cold as soon as this thing appeared? Even for me, it did kind of feel like a stretch, but, just putting it out there. And to be honest, once I spent more than 2 seconds reading just the bare minimum Wikipedia article about Indrid Cold, I realized very quickly that none of the lore surrounding him matches our experience in any way, shape, or form. Just the fact that he was known as a Smiling Man jumped out, but you do more research and it doesn't line up. This was not a fit. It was a dead end. Now, on a slight tangent, I do want to mention that it initially bothered me a bit that some things did seem to point to Indrid Cold being somewhat significant in even a small way, even though it was abundantly clear that what we initially experienced was not Indrid. Why did some things seem to line up? Why did the name come through the spirit box? Well, coincidentally, or perhaps synchronistically, the very first film festival that the original Dweller film got into, and where it had its first public screening, was the Festival of the Unseen in Parkersburg, West Virginia, the very town where the first Indrid Cold encounter was, and is still to this day very closely tied with Indrid and the Greater Mothman phenomenon. The film festival even had an Indrid Cold themed party as part of the event, which sounds so fun and so cool. Unfortunately, we were unable to attend the film festival in person because we were already booked for an event on the same day back at the Stimson Hospital. So at the same time our film Dweller screened at this festival in Indrid Cold stomping grounds, we were back at Stimson for the first time since making the film, talking about all things Dweller. It's pretty weird if you think about it. This random voice saying Indrid on the spirit box, and this random rabbit hole that ultimately turned out to be a dead end, but still was the first rabbit hole I tried going down, trying to explain this experience, would ultimately play a part in the greater story surrounding the release of the film. This little dead end actually became significant in a small way. That's weird, but I digress. That was a tangent. Once I realized that what we experienced was not Indrid Cold, I buried myself in more research, more rabbit holes. And that's when I learned about this old esoteric figure. It goes by many names, most popular being the Dweller on the Threshold, or the Guardian on the Threshold. And I knew right off the bat, this is what we experienced. From just baseline initial research, it seemed that the Dweller on the Threshold was a deceptively simple concept. Essentially, it said that everyone that is on a spiritual or supernatural path, which we were at the time, obviously, and still are, at one point experiences this Dweller, which is a symbol for an obstacle or a thing you must face and or contend with before you're able to move forward on your spiritual journey, spiritual path. Now, it sounds simple enough when you lay it out like that, but the more you read, the more you realize that not everyone views the Dweller as an actual entity, a literal guardian spirit that dwells in thresholds. We're going to go way more in depth on that later in the various interpretations, but let's not complicate things now. There's a lot of information we're just springing on you. But What I do want to point out now, though, is that many people have experienced the dweller on the threshold. I mean, it's said everyone on a spiritual journey does in one form or another. Similarities with our experience is that others who have experienced a dweller almost always describe the way it's tall, imposing, and darker than dark. The paralyzing fear, the feeling I described, is always a commonality. Every single story. And of course, it being in a threshold or doorway. And don't take it from me, listen to Rocky Rain's testimony that I featured in the original film. We've known Rocky for years, dating back to an investigation we did together in Ypsilanti, Michigan. As soon as I began to suspect we had an experience with a dweller on the threshold, I asked him about it and was surprised to hear he'd experienced the same thing.
We're here to talk about the dweller on the threshold. The dweller goes back centuries, and it is a common theme in most spiritual development. People that are practicing magic, witchcraft, whether it's witchcraft or ceremonial magic or primal spiritual practice, which some people call shamanism, there is a spirit there that when people are involved in spiritual endeavors, there's a spirit that shows up that challenges those people that are participating in this. Normally it shows up to a student to challenge them. It's like there to say, are you ready to take the next step? Because beyond this threshold, it's a very liminal time, and you're stepping into these places that aren't actually places. They're in between times. Even though a lot it may look real, it may feel real, it but there's a sense there that it's not real. It's a place that is not a place. It's a time that is not a time. It is a feeling that overwhelms. And you know you're in the presence of something much greater than what you are. And this being called the dweller on the threshold comes to challenge. It's like, okay, you have to be careful from here on out. If you can face me, you should be able to face whatever it is beyond this point. Now, I know when it happened with me, I was studying ritual magic through the Golden Dawn, and I was in bed, and it showed up in my doorway. It filled the whole doorway. It was cloaked and hooded. It was totally black except for two big, huge, red glowing eyes. And it stood there and it started coming into the room. I immediately switched into, protection and defense and started throwing out protections and incantations and everything else. And it paused, it stopped, and then it backed up. It backed back into the threshold and disappeared. It showed up one more time in a dream, and it was like a combative dream, and I saw it, and I heard in my head, "Be careful." So I saw it twice. Once in my bed, in the doorway of my bedroom, and once in a dream.
Rocky experienced it again in a dream, and so did I. You're going to hear another voice popping up here momentarily. That's my girlfriend, Angela.
Hi, I'm Angela.
A week before screening Dweller at the Midwest Weird Fest in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, I had another experience that I believe was with the Dweller on the threshold. This time, in a dream.
I had this dream where we had broken into an abandoned Masonic temple to investigate, and there was all these really creepy drawings and sketches, and I woke up from the dream and it was like a dream within a dream type of thing, because I woke up in bed exactly how I was. The room looked identical to how it normally is. I was dressed the same as I went to bed and everything, except I was still dreaming and I didn't know it. And in this dream, I was or what I thought was real life, I was talking about this dream I had about the Masonic Temple and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And then I heard a noise from the kitchen. So I go out to investigate this noise that I heard in the kitchen. I thought this was real life.
Mm-hmm.
So I can feel fear, which stood out to me because normally I don't feel anything when I dream. And I felt fear. I felt like someone was in the kitchen. I felt like something happened. Um, we do have a pet snake too, and once or twice she has escaped and ran amok as much as a snake can run without legs, run amok and knock things over. So I had mixed feelings. I was like, is it the snake? Did someone break in? I was scared.
Mm-hmm.
I round the corner and I see in the threshold of like the hallway right adjacent from the kitchen the darkest dark shadow figure, and I'm getting chills even almost a year later talking about it. The darkest dark figure, like
Like,
hovering.
this was terrifying. This was
Yeah,
terrifying.
it was hovering. Like it was like about maybe 6 inches off the ground, and it was the darkest dark, and it looked like it was like flowy, not like a cape per se, but like flowy behind, and it was just dark, the darkest black I've ever seen. But I could tell, even though it was just a silhouette, I could tell it was staring at me. And I
Didn't
had
you
to,
say it had red eyes? I swear you said it had red eyes.
I could like get the sense of eyes,
The sense of eyes. Okay.
but it didn't have eyes. And it was like drawing me in, but it was like I felt like I was gonna die. Like it felt like this thing was trying to kill
Like
me.
true fear.
Fear. And then as I'm kind of drawing in closer, there's a jump scare moment when this old lady whips out in front of me from the kitchen. And like it was like she was just setting down like dishes or something, like she was the one making the noises.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to call her like an old hag, like an old lady hag, but she was like disheveled, not from being like dirty or messy, but like it was like she like went on a fucking journey to get there. Like she came through time, like she's a time traveler and she just embarked on this journey. And she was just in my face, blocking this dark figure, but she had an even stronger fear. Everything, all the fear and everything I was feeling just got moved to this lady that was in my face, and she was giving me this look, and I could tell what the look was. It was, you know who I am, don't you? And I was just the whole time like, who is this? Who is this? And I realized I was looking at old Angela. It sunk in, like I knew it. It was Angela in her like 70s or 80s, all disheveled, coming out of time to come interrupt me, break into my apartment in that moment. And then I wake up,
Old me breaking
but
into the apartment.
I wake up and I guess I was panting really loud
Yep.
because
Because
Angela had
yeah.
turned and her face in real life now was
Mhm.
at the same place as old Angela was in my dream. So when I woke up,
Yeah.
there was no
This
cut.
is
There's no cut at all between old Angela and then real Angela. And I
that's
didn't know if I was dreaming still or not because remember, I already woke up and I woke up again. I thought everything was real
yeah,
stuff.
so you saw it was just another dream starting over
No,
with
I didn't
me
know
looking
what
at
was
you in the
happening. I
face.
didn't even think it was another dream. I was confused because I woke up even though I already woke up.
Yeah, it was bad. He was like panting and like breathing really heavily, so badly to the point I woke up and I rolled over to try to like wake him up from his dream. So like when I rolled over, I was leaning up a little bit at him, and then he not only like I just like you were just sleeping because he sleeps right on his back on your back bed and you sleep right on your back kind of like you're a mummy. And so but when I flipped over and I touched him to like try to wake him up, he was up a little bit on his side, so he was facing me in my face. So
So
that was
both
really
like
weird.
staring at each other.
Yeah, we both were staring at each
Same,
other.
just like the dream. So then when I woke up, I just started screaming, I guess. I didn't even know I was. It was just what I
And you screamed so loud. Like, I'm pretty sure we woke up our neighbors because I heard doors opening afterwards, and like, it was so bad.
I do believe that
And
was
another thing, too. before we went to bed, I remember specifically because there's like the outside lights, the street lights that kind of shine into our bedroom at night when it gets dark. And I remember looking like towards the closet and I'm like, wow, it's really dark in here because I didn't see no lights. It was like dark, you know? And then you had that. It's just really weird to think about, honestly. Yeah.
I don't like
I
talking about that dream. It's just too creepy even
well,
now.
I got like
I lived through it. Like I know you did too,
yeah.
Angela, but I do believe that's the only time I've had a dream where I don't think what happened was like subconscious. I think
Conscious, yeah.
something happened with that dream, with that night. The environment changed. You saw
That
it
was
dark.
weird. That was weird.
The fact that we lined up and were facing each other, like jump cut moment, like no change with your position. How did that even happen? The fact that I was screaming, I didn't even
It's
know.
really
It's like
weird.
that was raw,
It's
pure
creepy
terror.
and
As you can hear in our voices, this whole experience had shaken us to our core. It still gives us goosebumps. But simply attaching a name to it, like the Dweller, doesn't really explain anything. It only changes the question. After speaking with Rocky, I stopped asking, what do we encounter, and started asking, why? Why have people been describing the same experience for centuries? But to answer that, we have to leave the Stimson Hospital behind and follow the story back through history.